The sun was sinking behind the rusty towers of the alien junkyard, throwing long shadows over the broken machines. Ray, the human mechanic, wiped sweat from his forehead, his hands black with oil. He had been fixing a damaged hover engine all day, but the machine refused to start. With a sigh, he kicked the dusty ground, muttering to himself, "Nothing works in this place." The junkyard was quiet, only the sound of the wind whistling through metal scraps. Ray liked it that way. No crowd, no bosses, no noise, just machines and silence. But that evening, something unusual happened. He heard a soft sound like someone whispering, almost too faint to notice. Ray froze. He was sure no one ever came this far into the junkyard. He turned his head slowly, his eyes searching between piles of broken parts. Then, the whisper came again, trembling but clear this time. I can't play ball, sir." Ray blinked, confused. "Who's there?" he called, his voice echoing off the metal walls. For a moment, silence answered. Only the wind moved. Then from behind a half-crushed transport pod, a small figure stepped. Out it was a girl, but not human. Her skin shimmered faint blue, her eyes large and filled with sadness. She was thin, fragile, and her legs, they were strange. Metal joints clicked as she tried to walk, but the movement was shaky, uneven. She almost stumbled as she stood before him. Ray stared, surprised. He had seen many alien species during his time working off-world, but never one. Like her body looked young, maybe equal to a human child, but her legs were mechanical, clearly damaged, sparks flickering now and then. "I can't play ball, sir," she whispered again, lowering her head. Her voice carried shame, like she was confessing a sin. Ray scratched his head, unsure what to say. "Ball? What ball are you talking about, kid?" The alien girl lifted her gaze, her eyes shimmering like glass ready to break. "Sky ball," she said softly. "Everyone in my village plays it. It is our pride, our joy, our way of life." Her voice trembled. "But I cannot. My legs are broken." "I am broken." Ray looked at her more carefully. Her legs were not made by humans, but advanced alien tech. They must have once been strong, letting her run, jump, maybe even fly a little, but now they were rusted, bent, and clearly beyond normal repair. She tried to stand straighter, but her knees gave a sudden jerk, making her stumble. Ray quickly stepped forward and caught her arm. "Careful," he muttered, steadying her. The girl looked up at him, eyes wide, as if surprised that someone would help her stand. "Why are you here?" Ray asked, his tone softer now. "Why come to a junkyard? Shouldn't your people help you?" Her lips trembled, and for a moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, "They don't want me, sir. They say I am useless. They laugh. When I try, they say I cannot belong." Her voice cracked. "But I only wanted to play just once." Ray felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He had seen machines break, engines burn out, metals rust away. But this was different. This was a child with broken dreams, and somehow, it hurt more than any broken engine. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "This isn't my problem," he muttered to himself. "I fix machines, not lives." But then he glanced back at her, standing in the dim light, her broken legs sparking faintly, her small hands clutching the side of the junked pod for balance. Her eyes, though full of pain, still held a tiny spark of hope. She believed maybe, just maybe, he could help, and that spark made Ray's chest tighten. The wind grew stronger, carrying the sound of loose metal clattering. The junkyard felt less empty now, filled with tension, with a question hanging heavy in the air. The girl looked at him again and whispered, "You fix machines, don't you, sir? Then maybe you can fix me." Ray stood frozen, caught between reason and something deeper. He wanted to say no, to push her away, to return to his half-broken hover engine, but he could not move, could not speak. Something about her words had struck him, like a gear catching inside his own heart. The mechanic who thought he had seen everything, who believed nothing could surprise him, now stood in front of the strangest request of his life, a disabled alien girl asking him not to fix a machine, but to fix her chance at life. And as the shadows of the junkyard grew longer, Ray knew this meeting was only the beginning. The junkyard was quiet again, but Ray could not forget the girl's trembling voice. He sat on a pile of broken engines, staring at her thin figure as she tried to balance herself with those failing metal legs. Her words kept echoing inside his mind. "Maybe you can fix me, sir." He told himself he was just a mechanic, nothing more. But his heart refused to stay cold. Ray leaned forward, arms resting on his knees. "All right, kid," he said finally. "Tell me your story. Who are you, and what's this game you keep talking about?" The alien girl lifted her head slowly, her large eyes shimmering in the fading light. "My name is Leora," she whispered. "I was born in the village of Shalon, far across the dunes. Our people live for Skyball. It is not only a game, it is our way of proving who we are." Ray frowned. "Skyball? Sounds like some sport." Leora nodded, her broken legs clicking as she shifted her weight. "Yes, but more than sport. Skyball is honor, tradition. Every child learns to play before they can even walk. The ball is thrown high into the sky, and players leap with powered limbs to catch it. The one who controls the air controls the game." She looked down at her damaged joints, her voice growing softer. "But I was different. When I was small, I fell sick. My body grew weak. The elders replaced my legs with these, but they never worked as they should. I was always slower, always falling, and the others laughed." Ray studied her carefully. Her legs were indeed built for the game, sleek once, but now twisted with rust and cracks. Her people must have high technology, yet they had abandoned her with broken implants. It made no sense to him. "You mean to tell me," Ray muttered, "your folks just left you here because you couldn't play their game?" Leora's eyes glistened as she whispered, "Yes, sir. They say a child who cannot rise into the sky has no place on the ground either. I became a shadow in their eyes." Ray clenched his fists, anger rising in him. He had seen cruelty before, but to throw away a child over a sport, it felt wrong. But Leora's voice cut through his thoughts, gentle but full of pain. "Every year, the village holds the Skyball Festival. The young ones prove themselves before the elders. This year, I wanted to try, just once, but my legs failed me again. I fell in front of everyone. They laughed, they called me broken, useless." Her lips trembled as she added, "I ran away. I came here because I heard humans fix machines. And maybe you could make me normal." Ray looked at her small hands, at her fragile shoulders. There was nothing normal about her situation. Yet the courage it took for her to come here amazed him. Most children would have hidden in shame, but she had walked, limped, all the way to the junkyard, chasing a dream no one else believed in. Ray sighed, running a hand across his face. "I told you I'm no doctor, kid. I just fix junk." But Leora shook her head quickly, desperation filling her voice. "No, sir, machines are part of me. If you fix machines, maybe you can fix me too." Her words pressed against him like a weight. She wasn't begging for pity. She was begging for a chance. And something inside Ray stirred again. The old human stubbornness, the refusal to watch someone give up without a fight. He looked away, pretending to be annoyed. "Even if I tried, I don't have the tools. And your alien tech isn't something I understand." But his voice was weaker than before, and Leora noticed. Her eyes lit with a faint spark of hope. "You don't have to know everything," she whispered. "You just have to try. That is, more than anyone else ever did for me." The silence that followed was heavy. Ray stared at the dying sun, glowing red across the horizon. He remembered Earth, the faces of children running in open fields, the sound of laughter, the way humans always lifted the weak instead of leaving them behind. Wasn't that what made humans different? He stood slowly, brushing the dirt from his hands. "All right, Leora," he said at last, his voice low but firm. "Tell me everything about this Skyball, how the legs are supposed to work, what you need to do. Maybe I'll take a look." Her eyes widened in shock, then filled with tears, not of sadness but of relief. She straightened as much as she could, her broken legs clicking. "I will tell you everything, sir," she whispered. "I promise. I will not let you regret it." Ray gave a small, crooked smile. Don't thank me yet, kid, this might be impossible. But deep down, even as he said it, he knew the word impossible was not something humans liked to believe. And so, in the quiet heart of the junkyard, as the last light of day faded into night, the secret of the alien girl was shared. A secret not only of broken legs, but of a dream too heavy for one child to carry alone. Ray had no idea what he had just agreed to, but one thing was clear. The path forward would change both of them. The night settled over the junkyard, the stars shining cold and sharp above the desert sky. Ray sat near the glow of a small work lamp, staring at the alien girl who waited patiently across from him. Her name was Leora. Her legs were broken machines, and her dream was to play a game that defined her people. She had shared her story, her pain, and her hope, but now came the part Ray hated most. Telling the truth. Ray rubbed the back of his neck, tired from the long day. "Listen, kid," he began, his voice slow. "I fix ships, I patch engines, I make junk breathe again, but what you're asking, this is too much." Leora's eyes widened, the faint light reflecting in them. "Too much?" she whispered. Ray nodded. "Yes, too much. Your legs aren't like the machines I know, they're alien tech. Far ahead of what I understand. If I start messing with them, I could break you worse than you already are." The words came out sharp, and Ray saw her flinch. He cursed himself silently, but he could not take them back. The truth was heavy, and he thought it better to end things before they grew more dangerous. But Leora didn't lower her gaze. Instead, she held his eyes with surprising strength. "You are saying no, sir?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ray sighed. "I'm saying it's not possible. I can't fix what I don't understand, and I won't risk hurting you." Leora's small hands clenched into fists. Her thin shoulders shook, but she did not cry. Instead, she whispered, "I knew it. Everyone says the same thing. Everyone walks away." Her words stabbed into Ray's chest like a blade. He had expected tears, begging, or silence, but instead she spoke with cold acceptance. She had heard rejection too many times, and his refusal was just another stone added to her burden. Ray stood and walked a few steps away, trying to shake the guilt. "You don't understand," he muttered. "Humans may be stubborn, but we know when we're out of our depth. I'm not a hero, I'm just a mechanic." He kicked at the dirt, frustrated at himself, frustrated at the girl, frustrated at the broken world that had thrown this problem onto his lap. Behind him, Leora's voice came again, soft but firm. "Maybe you are not a hero, but you are human, and humans are different." Ray turned, frowning. "Different? What do you mean?" She looked at him with a strange calmness. "In stories we hear of humans, they do not give up, they push where others stop, they fight where others fall. That is why I came here. I believed the stories. I believed a human would try. Even when it seemed impossible." Ray froze, her words echoing in his mind. Humans do not give up, she had believed that. And here he was, proving her wrong. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The truth was, fear held him back. Not fear of machines, but fear of failing her. Fixing a broken ship was one thing, but fixing a broken dream was something else entirely. "You don't get it," he said finally, his voice quieter now. "If I fail, you'll hurt worse. You'll lose that spark you still carry. I can't take that from you." Leora tilted her head, confusion mixing with sadness. "You think my spark depends on you?" "No, sir, my spark depends on me. I have already fallen more times than I can count. I will fall again, but I stand every time if you try and fail. At least someone tried. That is more than I ever had." The junkyard wind whistled between piles of scrap. The silence heavy with her words, Ray felt his throat tighten. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Her courage was stronger than his fear, still. He shook his head, forcing his voice to stay firm. "I can't promise you anything, kid. I won't lie to you. I don't know if I can even make a difference, and I don't want you thinking I'm some miracle worker." Leora managed, a small smile, faint but real. "I do not need a miracle, sir. I only need someone who will not laugh, someone who will not walk away." "Is that too much?" Ray's chest burned with conflict. He had spent years fixing cold, silent machines, never caring for the people who owned them. Now here was a child asking not for perfection, but for effort, and he was refusing. Why? Because he was afraid, because he thought it wasn't his problem. He sighed, dragging a hand through his messy hair. You're stubborn, you know that. Leora tilted her head. Maybe I learned it from the stories about humans. Ray let out a small laugh, though. It was heavy with tension. Those stories might get me into trouble, he muttered. He turned back to his lamp and tools, shaking his head once more. For now, kid, my answer is no, I can't fix you. I won't promise what I can't deliver. The words hurt him more than he expected. Behind him, he heard the faint shuffle of Leora's broken legs as she tried to sit on a pile of scrap. Her silence heavier than any cry. Ray gritted his teeth, his hands trembling as he picked up a wrench. But deep down, beneath the refusal, a seed had been planted. A seed of doubt, of possibility, of a choice he knew he would face again. He told her no, but part of him already knew. The story was not over. Not yet. Morning came to the junkyard with the rising sun, the light spilling over the towers of broken machines. Ray was already awake, tools scattered around him, his mind restless after a night of tossing and turning. He had told the alien girl no, but her words had followed him into every corner of his thoughts. Humans don't give up, she had said, and the echo of that truth wouldn't leave him. Alone, Leora sat quietly nearby, her large eyes following his every move. She had not cried when he refused. She had not begged again, but her silence was heavy. It was the kind of silence that carried hope still burning, even when all reason said to let it die. Ray hated that silence because it made him feel like a coward. Finally, he slammed a wrench onto the table, startling her. All right, kid, he muttered. I don't know what I'm doing, but we'll give it a try. Leora blinked, stunned. Then her lips curved into the smallest smile he had ever seen. Thank you, sir, she whispered, her voice shaking with both fear and joy. Ray pointed a finger at her, his tone sharp. Don't thank me yet. I'm not promising success. We'll probably fail a dozen times, maybe more, but if you're willing to fall, I'll be there to help you stand. She nodded quickly, her eyes shining. I will stand, no matter how many times. And so it began. The human mechanic and the alien child. Ray dug through piles of junk, dragging out broken exosuits, cracked thrusters, damaged power cores. He muttered under his breath as he worked, welding, hammering, forcing old parts into something new. By noon, a crude frame was ready, a kind of exo-brace with straps and joints, heavy and ugly, but built. With stubborn care, Ray wiped the sweat from his brow. It's not pretty, but maybe it'll hold you upright, he said. Leora stared at the contraption, her hands trembling as she touched the cold metal. She whispered, It looks strong. Ray gave a rough laugh. It looks like junk, but let's see if it does more than sit there. He helped her into the frame, adjusting the straps around her thin shoulders, tightening bolts near her hips. The machine whirred to life with a low hum, the joints glowing faint blue from recycled energy cells. All right, Ray said, stepping back. Try moving. Leora's first step was shaky, her knees jerking. The brace clicked and hissed, supporting her weight unevenly. She tried another step, and the whole contraption wobbled. With a small cry, she tumbled forward, hitting the ground hard. Ray cursed and rushed to her side. Kid, you all right? He asked, lifting her carefully. Her face twisted in pain, but she nodded quickly, wiping dust from her cheeks. I am fine, sir. Let me try again. Ray shook his head. Not so fast, you'll hurt yourself. But her determination burned, too bright. She clung to his arm and whispered, If I fall, then I will fall, but I cannot stop. Please let me try. Reluctantly, Ray steadied her as she stood again. Her small hands gripped the frame, her teeth clenched, and she took another step. This time she lasted 3 strides before the brace gave a violent jerk and collapsed sideways, sending her into the dirt once more. Ray growled in frustration, slamming his fist against the metal pile. Damn it, I told you this was impossible, he snapped. But when he looked down, he saw Leora's face, scratched and tired, yet smiling faintly. She whispered, "I walked 3 steps, sir. That is more than yesterday." The mechanic froze, his anger draining. She was proud of 3 steps, 3 broken, clumsy steps, and in her pride, he saw no shame, only courage. He rubbed the back of his neck, muttering, "You're impossible, kid." The day went on, and so did their attempts. She fell, stood, fell again, and each time Ray lifted her back up. By sunset, her legs were bruised. The frame was dented, and Ray's hands were raw from constant adjustments. But Leora's laughter echoed across the junkyard. Soft, tired, but real. "No one ever tried this much for me," she said as she sat on a scrap heap, breathing hard. Ray looked at her, surprised by the words. "You're not angry? After all the falling, after all the failure?" She shook her head. "No, sir, because for the first time I feel like maybe I can. Maybe tomorrow will be better." Ray sat beside her, watching the sun sink. He wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, he found himself smiling. A small, reluctant smile that belonged to a man who realized he was in deeper than he had planned. The wind carried the sound of the desert, soft and endless. And in that silence, Ray made an unspoken promise. He would not walk away. Not now. Not after. Seeing her fight with so little and still refuse to quit. Tomorrow they would fail again, and the day after that, and maybe the day after that. But one day, somehow, they would succeed. Because humans didn't give up. And now, neither would she. Days turned into weeks in the junkyard, the sun rising and falling on the endless towers of broken machines. Ray and Leora kept working, morning to night, sweat and oil mixing with dust and sparks. Each day began with the same ritual. Ray adjusting the crude exoframe while Leora stood patiently, her small hands gripping the straps, her eyes steady. Each day ended the same too, with her falling, sometimes hard, sometimes soft, but always with the same whisper, "Let me try again, sir." Ray had lost count of how many times she hit the ground. At first he cursed with every fall, blaming himself, blaming the junk parts, blaming the universe. But slowly something changed. He began to see what Leora saw. Each failure was not the end, but a step. Her falls became lessons. Her bruises became proof that she was moving closer to what she dreamed. By the second week, she could walk across the junkyard without collapsing. By the third, she could run a short distance before stumbling. Ray watched in disbelief as the fragile girl with broken legs turned into someone stronger than he had ever imagined. Her laughter grew louder each evening, not the laughter of someone who had won, but the laughter of someone who refused to lose. One night, as the stars glimmered cold above, Ray sat sharpening a piece of scrap metal into a joint connector. Leora sat beside him, sipping water from a rusty cup. "Why do you keep helping me, sir?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft. Ray blinked, caught off guard. "What kind of question is that?" She looked down, fiddling with the cup. "You could walk away like everyone else, but you don't." Ray leaned back, staring at the stars. "Maybe because I've walked away too many times before," he muttered. "Maybe I'm tired of being that man." Leora tilted her head, confused, but she didn't ask more. She only smiled faintly. Ray turned to look at her then, realizing she had already grown taller in his eyes. Not a broken child, but a fighter. The next morning brought the real test. Ray had scavenged new parts, pulling together thrusters from an old hoverbike, power cells from a mining drill, and stabilizers from a broken drone. Piece by piece, he rebuilt the exosuit into something stronger, lighter, faster. It was still rough, still ugly, but it hummed with a new kind of energy. "All right, kid," Ray said, tightening the last bolt. "Today we see if this thing can fly." Leora's eyes widened. "Fly?" Ray grinned. "Skyball isn't just about walking, right? You said it's about jumping, about reaching the air, so let's see if we can get you off the ground." Leora's hands shook as she slid into the frame, the straps hugging her thin frame, the joints glowing with fresh power. Ray stepped back, his heart beating faster than he liked to admit. "Careful now, don't push too hard, just try a little jump." Leora bent her knees, the machine hissing softly. She pushed, and for the first time, her feet left the ground. It was only a few inches, but when she landed, she gasped, her eyes wide with shock and joy. I flew, sir, she whispered, trembling. Ray let out a laugh, a real one this time. Yeah, you did, kid, now do it again. Hour after hour she jumped, higher each time, the thrusters sparking, the frame straining but holding. Ray adjusted, tightened, rewired, and every time she left the ground she came down with a brighter smile. By evening, she wasn't just jumping, she was leaping, soaring a full meter into the air before landing on shaky but steady legs. Ray watched, arms crossed, his chest heavy with pride. The girl who had once whispered she could never play ball was now touching. The sky, even if only for seconds, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't finished, but it was real. That night, as the junkyard glowed under moonlight, Leora sat with grease on her cheeks, her laughter still echoing. No one has ever tried this much for me, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Ray looked at her, trying to act casual, but he felt his throat tighten. Don't get all soft on me, kid, he muttered. We're not done yet. This is just the start. But inside he knew something had shifted. This was more than fixing a machine, this was breaking chains that had held her down since birth. And now she was free, even if only for a few moments at a time, far away, beyond the dunes. The village of Shallan was preparing for the Skyball tournament. Ray didn't know it yet, but whispers of the event had already reached Leora's ears. Her people would gather, the elders would watch, and the players would leap for glory, and, in her heart, a fire was growing. She would not just watch, she would play. Ray stared at the stars that night, his hands resting on the half-broken frame beside him. He had started this thinking it was impossible, but now, with every leap she made, he believed more. The breakthrough had come, not only in her machine, but in both of them. Tomorrow, they would push higher, faster, braver, and maybe, just maybe, they would be ready for what was coming. The desert winds carried dust across the wide dunes, and far in the distance, the village of Shallan shone with lights. It was the day of the Skyball tournament, the day Leora had spoken of with both fear and hope. Ray tightened the last bolt on her upgraded exosuit, his hands steady but his heart racing. The suit hummed with power, built from scraps and stubbornness, ready for the greatest test yet. Leora stood tall, her eyes wide with both excitement and worry. Sir, she whispered, do you think I am ready? Ray looked at her, at the child who once could barely stand, now glowing with determination. He smirked, though his throat felt dry. You're more ready than you think, kid. Just remember what we practiced. One step, one leap, one catch at a time. They walked into the village square together, and at once the crowd erupted with whispers. Children pointed, elders frowned. Voices hissed through the air. Is that the broken one? She dares to come back? What is she wearing? Some human junk? Leora's steps faltered for a moment, but Ray placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Keep your head up, he muttered. They don't decide who you are. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she nodded, forcing her feet forward. At the center of the square, the skyball field was marked by glowing lines, the tall ring standing high above the sand. The ball itself floated gently in the air, glowing with energy, waiting for the first throw. Young players with gleaming exo-limbs stretched and leapt, their movements smooth and powerful. They glanced at Leora and laughed. Look, the broken girl is back, girl. She thinks she can play. Ray clenched his fists, but Leora raised her chin. I will play, she said softly, her voice barely carrying over the noise. The referee, an elder with a stern face, looked at her with disgust. You have no right. To stand here, you shame the game. Ray stepped forward, his voice hard as iron. She has every right, and if you have a problem, you can take it up with me. The elder's eyes narrowed at the human mechanic, but the crowd had grown restless. Whispers spread, curiosity mixing with scorn. Finally, the elder waved his hand. Fine. Let her embarrass herself. The whistle blew, and the game began. The ball shot into the air, glowing like a star. The players leapt after it, their thrusters roaring, bodies twisting with precision. And then Leora moved, Her exosuit hissed as the thrusters fired, lifting her higher than she had ever gone before. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The broken girl was flying. She reached for the ball, but another player slammed into her, knocking her back. She hit the ground hard, the impact rattling through her suit. The crowd laughed, cruel and sharp. "See? She is nothing." Ray started forward, but Leora lifted her hand, stopping him. Her breathing was heavy, but her eyes burned bright. She pushed herself up, her voice steady. "I will stand again." The next round, she leapt higher, her fingers brushing the ball before another shoved it away. Again she fell. Again the laughter rose, but again she stood. Each fall was met not with defeat, but with fire. Ray shouted from the sidelines, his voice booming across the square. "Show them what we built, Leora. Show them what humans never forget. We don't quit." The words struck her heart like lightning. On the next leap, she bent her knees deeper, thrusters glowing bright. She soared into the air, higher than before, the ball spinning just above her reach. She stretched, her suit straining, her hand finally closing around the glowing sphere. The crowd fell silent, shocked. Leora landed, stumbling but holding the ball tight. Her chest heaved, but her smile was wide. "I caught it, sir," she whispered, barely believing it herself. The game surged forward, her opponents faster and stronger. But Leora refused to yield. Every leap, every fall, every push. She answered with grit, with the lessons she had learned in the junkyard. And though she was smaller, though she was weaker, she played with something no one else had. Unyielding heart. As the final minutes ticked down, the score was tied. The ball floated high, waiting for the last play. The crowd leaned in, whispers turning into gasps. Could the broken girl dare to win? Ray clenched his fists, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This is it, kid, one last leap." Leora closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then bent her knees. The thrusters roared, fire and dust exploding beneath her. She soared higher than she ever had before, her body cutting through the air. Her hand reached, the ball glowing brighter as if it belonged to her alone. The crowd held its breath. Time itself seemed to freeze. Leora's fingers closed around the ball, and with a twist of her body, she hurled it through the ring. The glow exploded across the square, signaling the winning point. The silence broke into gasps, then roars of shock. The broken girl had won. Ray's chest swelled as he shouted, "That's my kid!" Leora landed, her legs trembling, her chest burning, but her smile brighter than the stars above. For the first time in her life, the crowd did not laugh. They stared in awe. The challenge had been faced, the game had been played, and Leora, once cast aside, had risen to the sky. The glowing ball passed through the tall ring, and the skyball field exploded with light. For a heartbeat, silence fell over the village of Shalyn. No one moved, no one breathed. Then the crowd erupted. Voices, clashing with shock, disbelief, and awe. The broken girl had not only played, she had won. Leora landed on shaky legs, her chest heaving, her arms trembling, but her smile stretched wide. Her eyes searched the crowd, not for the elders, not for the players who mocked her, but for Ray. And there he stood at the edge of the field, arms raised high, grease still on his hands, his grin wider than hers. "That's my kid," he shouted, his voice rough but proud. The crowd, once cruel and mocking, stared in silence as Leora stood tall. Some elders whispered angrily, others shook their heads in disbelief, but the younger children stared with wide eyes, their hearts pounding. For the first time, they had seen what no one thought possible, someone who had been broken rise higher than them all. Leora clutched the ball to her chest, her breathing ragged. She whispered, almost to herself, "Sir, I can play ball now." Her words drifted. On the wind, soft but powerful, Ray's throat tightened as he stepped onto the field, ignoring the stares, ignoring the whispers. When he reached her, he placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her as her legs shook. "You didn't just play, kid. You showed them what it means to fight," he said quietly. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering with tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." Ray shook his head. "No, you did it because you never gave up. I just gave you tools, the strength was always yours." The elder of the village approached, his face stern, his robes trailing in the sand. For a long moment, he looked at Leora, his eyes unreadable. Then, he spoke, his voice carrying across the square. "You have proven us wrong, child. You are no longer the broken one." Gasps rose from the crowd, whispers spreading like wildfire. Leora stood taller, her voice steady but humble. "I was never broken. I only needed someone to believe I could stand." The elder's lips tightened, but he gave a slow nod. "Perhaps humans are not as foolish as we thought," he said, casting a glance at Ray. Ray snorted, crossing his arms. "You've got no idea." Children ran forward, crowding around Leora, their eyes shining with wonder. "How did you do it?" one asked. "Can you teach us?" Another begged. For the first time in her life, they looked at her not with pity, not with cruelty, but with respect. Leora's heart swelled, tears sliding down her cheeks. She held the ball high, her voice carrying across the square. "I did it because I refused to quit. I did it because a human told me I could." Ray chuckled softly, scratching the back of his neck. "Careful, kid. You'll make me sound like a hero." But in his chest, pride burned brighter than he wanted to admit. The sun dipped low, casting golden light over the village. The tournament ended, but the story had only begun. The tale of the broken girl who flew spread beyond the dunes across the stars, whispered in markets and spaceports. They called her the Skyball Miracle, but she knew it was not a miracle. It was will, it was fight. It was humanity's stubborn spark carried in her heart. That night, as the village celebrated, Leora sat with Ray at the edge of the square. She leaned against him, exhausted but smiling. "Sir," she whispered, "do you think I can play again, not just today, but always?" Ray looked down at her, his rough features softening. "Kid, after what you did today, there's nothing you can't do." She closed her eyes, holding the ball close. For the first time, she felt not like an outcast, but like someone who belonged. Ray gazed at the stars above, his mind drifting to earth, to memories of children chasing balls in green fields, to laughter and stubbornness. He smiled faintly, realizing something. Humans didn't just fix machines. They fixed hope. They didn't just build, they believed, and that belief could lift even the weakest into the sky. And now that human spark lived inside an alien child, burning brighter than any star. The wind carried their laughter across the dunes, blending with the cheers of the village. The girl, once called broken, had become a symbol, not only to her people, but to anyone who had ever been told they could not. And the human mechanic, who thought he was nothing but grease and tools, had discovered he was more. Together, they had written a story that would not fade, a story that would travel across worlds, carried by those who whispered in awe, the girl who could not play and the human who refused to give up.